There were 3 candles burning on the kitchen counter when she walked in. She stopped in the doorway, keys still dangling from her fingers, mascara slightly smudged like she'd been laughing too hard or maybe crying just a little too long. The heels she wore, taller than usual, clicked once against the tile before she froze. Her eyes scanned the room. The dinner I'd made was cold now. Chicken piccata. I even grated the lemon zest. 2 plates, untouched. 2 glasses of red, still half full. A folded napkin on her seat. The silence in the room didn't feel like absence. It felt like someone had ripped the moment out of time and left the frame behind. And then she saw it. The suitcase closet, wide open. Both mine gone. The spot where my shoes always sat, empty. No coat on the hook. No watch on the dish by the sink. But the note? The note was the center of it all, lying right under her wine glass, its corners slightly curled from the heat of the candle. 7 words. That's all I gave her. And while she was still standing there, frozen, confused, probably rehearsing lies or half-truths in her head, I was already 5 hours away, driving through the dead dark with the windows down and my phone on airplane mode. No music, no map, just the sound of my own heartbeat and the weight of everything I didn't say. Because this didn't start with her seminar. It started with a scent, a cologne that wasn't mine, on the back of her coat, the one she never wore when she was with me. I didn't mention it right away. The scent. It was subtle, expensive, and completely unfamiliar. Not like the lavender oil she used to dab on her wrists or the vanilla lotion she swore by in the winter. No, this was darker, muskier. It clung to the inside of her coat, like fingerprints you couldn't see but knew were there. I remember standing by the door, holding that coat after she tossed it to me on her way to the bathroom. She'd come in late from strategy night with her team. Her lipstick was flawless, her hair perfectly in place. She joked about trust falls and PowerPoints as she passed me, but she never looked me in the eye. I brought the coat to my nose, curious, not suspicious. That changed in an instant. My stomach turned like I'd swallowed ice water. And that's when I began noticing everything else I had ignored for months. Like how she never unpacked fully after any of her trips. Her suitcase would sit by the closet for days, only partially opened, like she was afraid I'd see too much. I once asked her why she always brought heels to a seminar. She laughed and said, "You never know when you need to step up." I thought it was witty at the time. Now I know better. Then there was the necklace. A new one I'd never seen before, delicate gold with a tiny letter M dangling from it. When I asked her about it, she said it was from a coworker named Marcy. They all got matching ones, she said. I almost believed her. I wanted to believe her. But Marcy was the kind of woman who wore hiking boots to the office and referred to spreadsheets as corporate poison. No way she picked out dainty jewelry. The final straw came 2 days before she left for the weekend seminar. We were watching some documentary about astronauts, one of those space is scary ones. I turned to her to make a joke about how I wouldn't last 5 minutes in a rocket and caught her smiling, not at the screen, but at her phone. A soft, secret smile. The kind that doesn't belong in a room with someone else. I said nothing. I swallowed it down like everything else. Because that's what I did. That's what I always did. I made excuses for her mood swings, for her absences, for her growing disinterest in me, in us. I became a magician of denial, pulling trust out of thin air even as the truth stared me in the face. So when she kissed me goodbye that Friday morning, dragging her suitcase down the stairs, saying she'd be out of reception most of the time, I just nodded. I kissed her back. I waved. I even told her to have fun. Then I watched the Uber pull away. And I shut the door. And finally, I let myself unravel. I wasn't angry. Not at first. Just hollow. Like my own house had turned into a movie set, and I was the extra who didn't realize he wasn't in the scene anymore. I sat on the couch for hours, replaying everything, noticing details that made no sense until now, like how she never brought back any training materials, or how her so-called workshop didn't even show up on the company's calendar the one time I checked. I stopped eating. I didn't sleep. I just waited. Waited for her to come back, so I could not be here when she did. And while I waited, I cleaned every inch of our home. Not because I cared about tidiness, but because I wanted to erase any trace of me she could use as comfort. No smells, no warmth, no clutter. Just a shell. When I packed my things, I didn't take everything. Just what mattered. Some clothes, my journals, the old photo of us at the cabin in Vermont before we got married, Back when she still reached for my hand without thinking. Back when I was enough. I wanted her to feel the absence. Not as punishment, but as proof. Proof that I was done being invisible in my own life. I wasn't planning to call her. That was never part of it. The whole point of leaving was to be gone, not to leave breadcrumbs back to me. But on the second night of her trip, sometime after 2 a.m., I cracked. I just needed to hear how she sounded. I needed to know if there was even a trace of guilt in her voice, or if she'd laughed the same way she did when she thought I wasn't watching. I dialed once. No answer. I told myself I wouldn't try again. I lied to myself. At 2:08 a.m., I called again. Still no answer. But this time, the call didn't go straight to voicemail. It rang. For 5-6 times. I pictured her staring at the screen, seeing my name, hesitating. I imagined her in a hotel room, tangled in sheets that weren't ours, with a man who probably thought he was the center of her universe. Maybe she glanced at him and whispered, "It's no one." Maybe she let it ring out like a final act of cruelty. What she didn't know was I left the voicemail on purpose. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. I just let the silence roll. 27 seconds of dead air. Enough for her to hear the weight of it. The kind of silence that makes your chest tighten. The kind that speaks louder than any accusation. The next morning, she texted me. "Everything okay?" I didn't respond. I stared at that message for hours. She didn't ask where I was. Didn't say she missed me. Just, "Everything okay?" I realized right then that she wasn't worried I was hurt. She was worried I knew. That night, I went into our shared online storage account. She'd forgotten to change the password. I wasn't even snooping. Not really. I just needed to see if she'd left clues behind. And oh, she had. There were 2 photos in a hidden folder, lazily labeled temp. One was blurry, taken in a hotel hallway mirror. She was holding her phone up, making that same smug half-smile she used to give me before we went out. But she wasn't alone. There was a man behind her, in a suit jacket with no tie, holding a wine glass. His arm was wrapped around her waist like he owned her. The second photo was worse. It was a menu. Candlelit table. 2 glasses. A single plate with a bite taken out. Her hand was in the frame. I knew it by the ring she wore, my grandmother's, the one I proposed with. And his hand was reaching for hers. The caption said, "Best night yet." I sat there for what felt like forever, just staring at those words. Best night yet. Not even a shred of hesitation. No remorse. Just a celebration of betrayal. That's when I started writing the note. It took me 3 drafts. The first one was angry. The second, pathetic. The third was the one I left behind. 7 words. Clean. Final. If this was a workshop, I passed. But I wasn't done yet. There was one thing left. One final string I had to cut. Dr. Cheddar. Our cat. I hated that cat. He clawed the furniture, ignored me entirely, and always threw up on my side of the bed. But he loved her, and she doted on him like a mother hen. So before I left, I took him to her sister's place across town. I didn't leave a note. She'd figure it out. And then I took my suitcase. I placed the letter. I lit the candles. I made dinner one last time. And I walked out, still in the clothes she hugged me goodbye in 3 days earlier. She always came home on Sundays. Like clockwork. No matter where she'd been. Conferences, retreats, wine tastings disguised as corporate summits. She'd walk through the door just after sunset, heels clicking in the hall, phone still in hand, halfway through some story she never finished telling me. And I'd always be there, on the couch or by the stove, pretending not to wait, pretending not to care that she never asked me about my weekend. But this time, there was no one to meet her. Just silence, and the faint flicker of dying candles, and a cold plate of chicken piccata that had long since started to smell metallic. According to her sister, who called me the next day screaming into the phone, I ruined her. That's how she put it. You ruined her. As if betrayal had a reverse button, and I pressed it too hard. She said Corinne walked in expecting dinner and kisses, and instead found a tomb. She said she kept whispering my name like she expected me to pop out from behind a curtain. As if I was playing some elaborate joke. As if this was just one of my episodes. But I wasn't hiding. I was already 2 states away, sitting in a chain motel room that reeked of bleach and cigarette ghosts, with my phone off and my heart screaming in the hollow of my chest. You want to know the worst part? Even after everything, even after the scent of his cologne and the photos and the lies so brittle they cracked the moment I breathed near them, I still imagined her breaking down in tears. I still wanted her to regret it. Not for the drama. Not even for justice. Just so I could matter again, even in the ashes. But no, that's not what happened. Her sister told me Corinne didn't cry. Not right away. Instead, she stood frozen, reading my 7-word note over and over again like it was in a foreign language. Then she calmly opened the fridge, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat at the table like she was expecting a dinner guest. Like I was just late. And then she ate. Cold chicken, rubbery pasta. Every bite. Alone. She didn't text me that night. Didn't call. The woman who once messaged me 6 times in a row because I forgot to buy almond milk just vanished. Not a word. Not a peep. Not even a how could you. It was like she wanted to prove she didn't care. That she could win the silence game. But the thing is, I wasn't playing anymore. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Not from her. From an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, and for once, I was grateful for the motel's paper-thin walls. Because when I played it back and heard his voice, Mikhail's, my stomach flipped inside out. He sounded calm. Too calm. Like a man who thought he'd already won. Thad, I'm assuming you figured things out. Corinne didn't mean for it to happen this way. We didn't plan anything. But you've always known you two weren't meant for the long haul. I hope you'll eventually understand. She deserves to be happy. He hoped I'd understand. Understand what, exactly? That he just happened to stumble into my marriage and decided to take what he liked? That she deserved to be happy at the expense of 6 years of my life. I didn't even realize I'd crushed the motel's cheap plastic cup in my hand until water was dripping through my fingers. No, I wasn't going to be the invisible one anymore. I booked a new room. I paid in cash. I changed my number. And I made a list. Not for revenge. For clarity. Because if she thought the note and the suitcase were the end, she hadn't been paying attention to the real story. I used to make grocery lists. Organized by aisle, subcategorized by need. Always with little circles next to each item, so I could check them off with a satisfying stroke of my pen. Corinne used to tease me about it. She'd laugh and say, "You treat produce like a mission briefing." But I liked it. It made things feel manageable. In control. So when I sat on the edge of that motel bed with my back aching from the cheap mattress and a towel that still smelled faintly of someone else's cologne, I reached for my notebook and started a new list. Not for groceries. Not for errands. Not for her. For me. For what I had lost, what I had ignored, and what I needed to face head on. List title: Things I Pretended Not to Notice. The perfume bottle that disappeared from the counter in June and returned in August with less than a third left. The night she came home with 2 different earrings and said one had fallen off in the Uber. Her sudden obsession with Brazilian jazz. The out-of-office email she never mentioned setting up. How she stopped saying love you when hanging up. Only by. I filled 2 pages. Tiny, bullet point betrayals. Not all of them hard proof, but each one a cut that I had let scab over without ever cleaning the wound. This wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't even about heartbreak. It was about identity. Because somewhere in that 6-year haze of compromise and cowardice, I had lost mine. I had become a placeholder in my own story. A footnote in someone else's love affair. She always said I was too sensitive. That I read too much into things. That I needed to loosen up. And I let her say those things because I thought being easy to love meant being easy to dismiss. Being quiet. Being small. But now I saw it clearly. She didn't fall out of love with me because I was weak. She fell out of love because I refused to play her game of pretending. That voicemail from Mikhail haunted me, though. His voice so calm, so sure, like a man ordering wine at a restaurant he didn't pay for. There was something in it, some smug finality, that clung to my ribs. He thought this was over. He thought I'd slink away, lick my wounds, and vanish like a polite mistake. That's when I made a second list. List title: What They Didn't Know. I had already spoken to someone at her company, an HR assistant who thought I was a contractor. She confirmed there was no weekend seminar. The hotel they stayed at? I called. She reserved the room herself, under my last name. Classy. Mikhail was married. And his wife's name, according to a quick search, was Delia. I didn't know what I was going to do with that information yet. I wasn't out for revenge. That would have made me just another character in their drama. But I couldn't shake the idea that these people had built a future out of my blind trust, and were now sipping wine over its ruins. I stared at the motel's popcorn ceiling and thought about the last real conversation Corinne and I ever had. It was about dishwasher detergent. She said I always use too much, that I never read the instructions on the label. I told her I just wanted the dishes to be clean, that maybe if we focused less on the detergent and more on why we never had dinner together anymore, we'd actually be okay. She rolled her eyes, said I was overreacting. Again, but I wasn't. Not this time. I was done scrubbing messes I didn't make. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I hadn't left her that note to hurt her. I'd left it because I finally understood something terrifying and liberating at once. She was never coming back to me, because she had never really been here to begin with. When Corinne came home that Sunday evening, she didn't just find my absence and the note. She found a house transformed. Every photo frame that once held our smiles was empty. Not smashed, not torn up, just empty. I'd left the frames in perfect alignment on the shelves, as if the ghosts of our memories still sat inside them. The walls were bare except for the faint outlines where our wedding pictures used to hang. The drawers were still full of her things, her shoes neatly lined up, her mug stacked exactly the way she liked. It wasn't rage. It was erasure, and I knew that would scare her more than any outburst ever could. What she didn't know was that while she was driving back from her seminar, I was watching her apartment from a distance one last time. I parked my car across the street under a flickering lamp, the engine off, my heart thundering. Through the window, I saw her step inside, still in her travel clothes, still with that dark lipstick she never wore around me. She hesitated at the threshold like a burglar entering her own home. She stood frozen for a long minute, reading my note once, twice, 3 times, her fingers trembling slightly though her face stayed composed. And then she did something I'll never forget. She didn't call me. She didn't collapse. She started walking slowly from room to room, touching everything I hadn't taken. Our couch, the edge of the kitchen counter, the towel hook in the bathroom, as if trying to map out the empty space where I had been. She opened the closet and saw the absence of my clothes like a hole in the world. She went into the kitchen, sat at the table, and poured herself a glass of wine. And she ate the cold dinner I had left there like it was some sacrament she had no choice but to take. I thought watching her do that would give me satisfaction. It didn't. It gutted me. Because even in that moment, watching her alone, realizing what she'd done, chewing my cold pasta with a blank stare, I still wanted to run back inside. I still wanted to shake her shoulders and ask why. I wanted her to break, to scream, to apologize, to show me something human instead of that terrifying calm. But I stayed in the car, because I'd promised myself no more rescues. No more soft landings for someone who never once gave me one. I started the engine before she looked up at the window. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the keys. By the time she went to the bedroom and found the empty nightstand and the missing cat, I was already an hour down the interstate. The road ahead was nothing but black tar and broken white lines, but it felt more like freedom than any vacation I'd ever taken. My phone buzzed once in the cup holder. Unknown number again. I let it ring out. I didn't need to hear Mikhail's voice a second time to know what he'd say. Because here's the thing. The note and the empty frames weren't the end. They were the beginning of something I should have done years ago. This wasn't about hurting her. It wasn't about shaming her. It was about building my own silence. The kind of silence you choose, not the kind someone imposes on you by ignoring your calls. And as I drove deeper into the night, it finally hit me. I wasn't running away from her. I was running back toward myself, toward a version of me that hadn't yet been bent small enough to fit inside her excuses. A version that remembered what it felt like to matter. The highway at night has its own language. It isn't quiet. Not really. There's the hiss of tires on asphalt, the occasional crackle of a late-night radio host in the car next to you, the low growl of 18-wheelers overtaking you like steel whales. But underneath all of that noise is a hum. A deep, steady hum that gets inside your bones and tells you you're moving away from something, even if you don't know what you're moving toward. I'd been driving for hours when that hum finally started to feel like my heartbeat. I stopped at a gas station somewhere in West Virginia, the kind of place that sells everything from beef jerky to Christmas ornaments. I filled the tank, went inside, and bought a coffee that tasted like burnt paper and a stale cinnamon roll. The cashier didn't even look up. And for the first time in years, I realized no one in that place knew me as the man Corinne rolled her eyes at. No one saw me as the placeholder husband. I was just a tired guy with a bad haircut, paying cash. It should have felt liberating. It didn't. It felt like floating. The motel I checked into was worse than the first. A single flickering bulb above the door. A carpet so old it felt damp. A television from the late 90s bolted to a bracket in the corner. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the black TV screen, and tried to picture Corinne's face when she realized I'd taken Dr. Cheddar to her sister's. Would she even notice the absence of that annoying little furball? Would she panic, thinking he'd run out into the street? Or would she shrug it off, pour another glass of wine, and text Mikhail some clever line about new beginnings? I hated how easily my mind slid back to her, even now. I hated that after everything, she still lived rent-free in the quiet parts of my head. That's when I pulled out my notebook again and started writing. Not lists this time, but memories. I wrote about the first time she took my hand at that outdoor concert, the way her hair smelled like citrus in the wind. I wrote about the day we moved into our apartment, unpacking boxes at midnight and eating pizza straight out of the box on the floor. I wrote about the night we almost broke up before the wedding, when she cried into my shirt and promised she wasn't like other people, that she didn't believe in games. I wrote and wrote until the pen dug through the paper. And then I realized something. These weren't love notes anymore. They were autopsies. I wasn't keeping her alive on the page. I was laying her to rest. The woman I loved had been gone a long time. I'd just been living with her shadow. That's when the text came through. From an unknown number. Not Mikhail this time. It was her. One sentence. Where are you? Not come back. Not I'm sorry. Not we need to talk. Just those 3 words. I stared at the screen until it went dark again. For the first time since I'd left, I didn't feel an urge to answer. Not even to gloat. Because suddenly it hit me. This was the first time in years that she didn't know exactly where I was, what I was doing, how to pull me back into her orbit. And for the first time in years, I didn't need her to know. I closed the phone, put it face down, turned off the motel light. And for a moment, in the dark, I didn't feel like I was floating anymore. I felt like I'd finally landed. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of silence, of early morning walks in unfamiliar towns, of sleeping in rooms where no one knew my name, and no one cared that I didn't answer messages that kept coming in from numbers I'd long since stopped saving. I changed phones, bought a burner, left my wedding ring in a donation box outside a thrift shop next to a chipped porcelain angel. I didn't watch it fall in. I just let go. I'd like to say I felt heroic, that walking away felt like rising from the ashes. But the truth is, it didn't feel like a movie. It felt quiet, small, like getting out of a cold bath and wrapping yourself in a towel. Not warm, but warmer. And that was enough. I ended up in a little coastal town, one of those blink-and-you'll-miss-it places with gray waves, salty air, and cafes that still had corkboards full of paper ads instead of digital menus. I rented a room above a bookstore. The owner was an older guy named Alton, who spoke in grunts and never asked questions. He handed me the key like we'd done this 100 times. I was grateful for that. Days passed slowly. I started helping around the shop. Not for pay, just for motion. I organized the shelves, made coffee for early morning regulars, fed the stray tabby cat that lingered near the back door like he'd been waiting for someone to notice him. I named him Sully. I stopped thinking about Corinne every hour. Then every day. Then only when I saw something she would have hated. A poorly made pun in a book title, a mismatched cup and saucer set at a cafe, a tourist wearing socks with sandals. Little by little, she became a shadow instead of a weight. And then one afternoon, as I was setting out chairs for a local poetry reading, I looked up, and she was there. Not Corinne. Her. She was struggling to carry 2 tote bags, one of them bursting with secondhand books, the other full of art supplies. She looked up, caught me watching, and rolled her eyes at herself. Note to self, she said, breathless. Never buy this many hardcovers when you have spaghetti arms. I laughed. I don't know why. It just slipped out. She smiled at the sound. It wasn't the smile of someone trying to impress. It was the smile of someone who didn't need to. Want help? I asked. Only if you don't mind being roped into a conversation about why bookmarks are a personality trait. I helped her. She stayed for the reading. She came back the next day, and the one after that. Her name was Elise. She didn't ask about my past. Didn't press. She talked about things that didn't need to be profound to matter. Her awful driving test, the way she cried at animated movies, how she once got lost in a museum for 2 hours and ended up giving tours to strangers just so no one would question her being there. With her, I didn't feel like a ghost of a husband or a fool piecing himself together with duct tape and denial. I felt like me. Clumsy, soft-spoken, still a little shaky, but real. One morning, as we sat on the bookstore's steps sharing a thermos of bitter coffee, she nudged my knee and said, "You always look like you're carrying something heavy, but your eyes are quiet." I didn't say anything. I just smiled. Because the truth was, I wasn't carrying anything anymore. And back in a city that no longer felt like home, Corinne was probably still trying to figure out how someone like me could just vanish. But the answer was simple. She lost the game she didn't know I was playing. The one where the quiet man finally stands up, leaves the room, and never looks back. And the best part? He finds someone better waiting outside the door.